You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and today we have another special guest. We're going to talk to a filmmaker and author, Daniel Hess. He has an awesome story, but he has also an award-winning film production company, and we're going to learn a little bit about him today. And before we get too deep into details, I just want to say welcome to you, Daniel, to the show, and thanks for being on today, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's a complete pleasure here.
And man, you have a powerful story, man. You've been through a lot of challenges, man, but you also have an awesome company, Two Tony Productions. You go to the website, twotonyproductions.com. But before we talk about your company, man, also you have a good a book that you wrote, Just a Boy Blaming Himself. Tell us a little bit about you before all this took place.
Yeah, so my story sort of begins with a childhood that in many respects was kind of cut short for me. Growing up, I was very close with my cousin, who was also a really close friend. And he was like the older brother that I kind of never had because I'm the oldest from my family. And he had cystic fibrosis. And, you know, when you're a kid, you don't think too much about stuff like that. You know, what kind of impact that can have on someone's health. And when I was 10 years old, he was 14. And I'll never forget the day. It was right before the summer that he was taken to the hospital and went into a coma and was in a coma for about 2 months, that we would go and see him pretty much every day as much as we could. And he unfortunately never came out of the coma. And it was only 10 days before my 11th birthday that he actually passed away. And so for me, that was, you know, the point in which the world shifted in a lot of ways. It stopped being, you know, easygoing, happy-go-lucky. It was, okay, you know, somebody can die at age 14. This is a possibility. So it really kind of shifted my perspective for a long time. And still influences, you know, everything I do today, because, you know, even the company is named after him. And, you know, I try to keep his memory alive as much as I can. And I try to have it be a source of inspiration for me, because, you know, he taught me a lot growing up and I always kind of looked up to him. And even though he passed when he was 14, it's still one of those things where it's like, he's still that older brother in my mind. You know what I mean?
And that's heavy, man. I mean, I can't ask you, how did you deal with that? Because I couldn't imagine, number one, at that age, losing a friend that young. But did you have, I mean, you just tell us, man, how did you, I mean, get through that over the years?
I mean, you know, the initial shock of it all, of course, was really tough. One of the things that kind of helped me initially was talking with his brother. He kind of just put it in this perspective of like, you know, he's not suffering. He's not in a bad place. You know, he wouldn't want you to be sad. So I've always tried to hold that thought in my head and kind of remember that, you know, life is short and is meant to be lived. So, you know, trying to wallow in something was tough, you know, getting through it. But I kind of found this inner strength in myself, like just to try to deal with everything. So, you know, it was still, though, it was growing up, I felt very isolated because I felt like that was my friend. That was my best friend, my closest friend. And, you know, even now I've had very close friends, but I still never consider anybody on that same level as what it was with him. So it's made relationships tough. It's made intimate relationships tough. Like, it's definitely presented its own set of challenges. But I always tried to remember that, you know, it's only a limited time that we're here. So you kind of have to make the most of things. Because, you know, it's like, here I am, I'm 32 now, going on 32. And it's just like, he only had 14 years. And so it's just crazy when you think about like how short things can go and everything.
Once again, we're listening to Unfiltered Radio, talking to Daniel Hess. And you mentioned moments ago that you named a company after him. And so Two Tony Productions. And was that something what was the time frame in that when you decided that's something you wanted to do? Was that something you always had in mind from a young age, or was that something you developed into later on in life?
Yeah, I'd definitely say it was developed into. I first incorporated the company when I was in college, and it was kind of done because I saw a lot of my peers sort of just naming companies after themselves or their initials, and I just felt like that was, a little shallow. So I'd always remembered not too long after he had passed, my aunt his mom had seen a psychic, and for whatever reason, the psychic I wasn't there, but they had mentioned about me, and she kind of mentioned that, I would forget about him or something like that. And that always stuck with me from that young age. So the first big opportunity I had to have something to memorialize him, that's sort of what I wanted to do, because I always remembered that like, no, I'm not going to ever forget the impact that he had on my life. So yeah, it was just one of those serendipitous things that sort of all came together around that time.
And so you established this company in 2009.
Yes.
And what was the style of the work that you wanted to do? What kind of just projects were you hoping that you would launch through this new brand?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was always about trying to find deep creativity and trying to tell stories that were, from different perspectives and things like that. It was always about, trying to create something unique. Because again, going through film school and stuff, you see a lot of people just, making films about stuff that was relevant at the time, like parties and, just silly things like that. So for me, I always wanted to try to make things at like a deeper level. And, that's carried all the way through even to now. I've always just tried to be smart and calculating about everything that I do in life and, not take things, head first and just go blindly into stuff. I try to really come prepared and plan it all out. So I just wanted it to be something that shows that in the final products of everything that I try to do. So I don't put out a lot of stuff, but when I do put out things, the push is to be as cinematic and creative and different as it possibly can be. So that's always kind of the end mission.
And with this company, Two Tony Productions, there is always, with every business, some learning curves and some ups and downs. Mm-hmm. But based on what I read in your emails, you've done pretty well for yourself, man. So what allowed you to just have that super focus on building your business from zero to where you are today?
I mean, yeah, it's really about just endless hours of outreach, of, presenting things on social media, on just talking to people about stuff. I mean, whenever I've tried to get into a certain field of something related to video, first I try to do the research into it by seeing what companies that maybe are a little more established or have a track record in some specific field, and then sort of take those ideas and, use them in what I'm trying to do. But, it's one of those things. It's that cliche of the grind for sure, because you are just reaching out to hundreds of people sometimes, in a course of a few weeks, and maybe you'll get one or two that are like serious kind of messages that you'll get back. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to have that thick skin too, because it's just, whenever you're starting out anything new, nobody knows who you are. You don't have a reputation. So you're really trying to work hard to convince people to even take the risk on what you're doing. And that's what it's always been about for me, is just, trying to have a higher level of presentation to showcase what I'm capable of, and then being able to back that up with like what I'm doing and also how I interact with people day to day.
Once again, talking to Daniel Hess. And when you are doing the day-to-day grind, you had a situation that came up. And I think this is an interesting part because you had to get surgery.
Yes.
Can you tell us what led up to that and how that kind of changed things?
Yeah, so I was actually born with a heart condition known as aortic valve stenosis, which essentially means when my aortic valve is pumping blood from the heart, some of it actually leaks back in when, that shouldn't happen. So, growing up, it really changed a lot of things for me just because as I got older, certain sports, weren't something I was able to do. I was never allowed to lift weights, like do bench press type stuff. So any kind of dreams of like any sports related stuff were very quickly dashed, although I was never the most athletic kid growing up. But then as I got older, it sort of became one of those things where they kept telling me, oh, maybe when you're in your 50s, your 60s, you might have to get surgery. And when I was 28, I switched cardiologists, and they kind of took a look at everything, and they were like, this isn't looking great. We kind of think you're probably going to have to get surgery in a couple years. So I changed my insurance immediately to a better plan than what I had, just in case, and got a second opinion, and they kind of felt the same way. So for the last couple of years, I was, really looking in on it. But then finally, December of this last year, they kind of said, look, you got to get the full surgery. This is looking bad, So I had to, and it was only a few weeks. That's the crazy part. It was like mid-December when they told me you're going to need surgery. And by January 14th, like a month later, I was getting surgery. And I mean, it really knocked me on my butt. I was thinking, okay, it's open heart surgery. I was pretty terrified for many years, which sort of helped me kind of get my focus back into the creative space. Because with any open heart surgery, the technology is of course there, but you don't know what's going to happen. The body acts in different ways in different scenarios. So for the build up to all of this, I was kind of having this newfound resurgence of, okay, I want to have stories to tell. I want to get this out there because, again, life is short. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. So, the surgery happened, and thankfully there was no major complications with that part of it. I came out okay, but it really messed with a lot of things. There's a lot of things they don't tell you to anticipate when you come out of it. And I was dealing with things like brain fog, where I was literally not remembering a whole day by the end of a day. It was just this very strange place to be in, and just feeling insanely weak. Because, not to be too graphic, but with open heart surgery, they're opening up the sternum. So, that controls so much upper body movement that you essentially can't do much with your arms. You can't really grab things or push things, or else you risk, breaking wires and stuff like that. So there was just a lot of caveats and changes that were all happening within this short frame of time. And, healing. It took 3 months precisely before I felt confident enough to put more pressure on my chest and do more upper body stuff. Which again, like I said, I thought, okay, I'm going to get open heart surgery. Like 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I'll at least be back to working and stuff. And that was definitely not the case. It's definitely one of those life-changing experiences that puts it all into perspective. And, it knocks you down, but when you get back up, you feel that much more thankful at the end of the day.
Once again, listen on Focus Radio, talking to Daniel Hess. And man, I mean, that in itself is heavy. I mean,
Yeah.
That's just saying it lightly. When I had to ask this question, when you were starting to, I guess, in the healing stages, was it difficult to even think about your business and other things like that? Or were you motivated to get yourself back to, the grind eventually?
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to just kind of like jump right back into it. And, I was finding that I was trying to have like Zoom meetings still and talk to people. And it was just so incredibly like tiring to even do a single Zoom meeting. Just, it felt like a lot. And I kind of went through a bit of a depression there just because everything changed. I mean, imagine, I always tell people this is like, imagine one day you wake up and your entire heartbeat is different. And that's sort of what happened to me. They changed the valve out with a mechanical one. And so when I'm in like an enclosed, smaller room or something, like I can hear the ticking of the mechanical valve and my heart rate is completely different. So like even sleeping for a while was weird because it just was a big adjustment. So I'll say that during the healing time, it was tough, but I was staying at least on top of it enough to keep the wheels moving. But once I got to that point where I was like, no more of the brain fog, where I was feeling more up to things, like I was just right back to it. And since I've been in my fully healed stage, it's just, I've been, doing just as much, if not more than I was, before the surgery, which has been like incredible because in those couple months, it definitely had some times where I felt like, am I ever going to get back to full capacity? What's going to happen with the business? What's going to happen with my stories that I'm trying to get out there? And so, I'm thankful that I can say now that I'm right back to 100% and just keeping things trucking along.
And also you wrote a book, Just a Boy Blaming Himself, released on January 11th, 2021. What inspired you to write the book, and what was the core message that you're trying to get across for the readers?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was one of those things where I had been just musing with these poems for a very, very long time. And I would just always save them to my phone through just like a notepad app. And over the years, I'd kind of shared them with more and more friends and people that I had met and stuff like that. And I was always getting, good feedback on it all, but I just never really felt super duper confident in what I was writing or what I was doing being worthwhile to put out there for people. And then something just sort of clicked, especially over the course of the pandemic in 2020, where I just sort of realized that, I should, the toughest part is putting yourself out there. So I just knew it was time for me to do that. And so I took what was essentially like 6 years of poetry and condensed it down into a single book. And for me, it was, something that I can just share with people. And I think it really encapsulates a lot of what we all sort of deal with as we get older and go through, challenging times in life. And so for me, I really wanted people to just feel not so alone with like anything they're struggling with and sort of present these raw kind of writings in a sense that, they could just take from it many, many different things just about like life and how it can be better, how there are people that you can relate to and all of those things. So that was kind of for me, the goal of it. And, to finally put something out there for actual people to have feedback on and kind of respond to what I was doing, which has been incredible.
Once again, talking to Daniel Hess on Unfiltered Radio. Now, it seems that you've done so much, but you have other stuff you do too. Believe it or not, you have a podcast that you do and you host. It's like, man, like I have no excuses, man. Like none of us listening to this has any excuses. What
I just try to stay busy.
I was just going to ask you, what drives you to not settle, right? Because you can have a great excuse to kind of calm down a little bit, but what drives you to never settle and just play it safe?
I mean, I just feel like life is about pushing as hard as you can and trying to get somewhere that you weren't before. So for me, the end goal is to just be in a place where I can write and be in these different networks with people and, making films come to life and just all these big things. And, I think there is an argument for this sort of letting go of stuff like that as we get older, as just being these kind of like daydreams and stuff like that. But, I've always felt like when we have enough passion for something and we put enough time into it, the reward is going to be there at the end of the day. So I just look at it as, these are all things that help me get to a place that I'm trying to get to in my career, in my life. And also as a way to bring a community of indie creators together, because, there are just so many wonderful people out there making amazing films, writing amazing books. And, I've sort of made this little mini platform for a lot of these people that otherwise, might not have a voice, just because of the way media works. If you're not a household name, it's can be so tough to like get coverage on anything you're doing. And I struggled with that myself, making film projects. And so that was sort of the inspiration for all of that. But just any way that I can meet amazing people and just be able to talk with them and talk shop and talk film and books and everything else, it's just awesome. And it just keeps me pushing and trying to be more and more creative. And, I look at life as one of those things where if you're trying to do anything, do it the best you can, because you'll know inevitably that, you might not be putting 110% effort into it. And the end result kind of speaks for itself sometimes. So that's always been like my mantra, especially post-surgery, is just like, if I'm going to do it, like, let's do it as right as we can and put as much into it as we can. And, just not stop that momentum for anything.
I think that's the key. What you just said, do it the best you can. I mean, for you and what you've done and what you overcame from childhood to open heart surgery. I mean, my knees got weak and I was sitting down. So it's like, that is very encouraging. And I just take away, just eliminate excuses in life. And just, if like you said, hey, you have that passion, then take the excuses out and just do what you know is necessary to do so that people can see the results speak for you. So as we are wrapping up, what would you tell to the audience? Because you do it all. You do the writing, you shoot weddings, you do filmmaking, you publish your own book, you do marketing for your business. What would you say to people out there who they started a brand or business and they just need that encouragement to stick with it and to not, dim themselves in their light and make excuses?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest obstacles I've had to overcome over the years, and I think a lot of folks have the same problem that you run into, is that there's, I think, this big glorification that we have as a culture where, we present things as this like overnight success. And that when you're not finding this overnight success, quote unquote, I think the easy thing is to say, well, that was a good thought, but let's just kind of pack it up and move on to something else. But, I like to say it's the exception to the rule, not the rule. And, when you think about it, even some of these stories that you'll hear, it's like, if you're really into that stuff, dig into it, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen like artists or creatives and stuff, and they're presented in this form that's like, oh, they just sort of popped into existence. But it's like, no, they were doing years and years and years of building and grinding and pushing themselves to their absolute limit. And that's how they got to this place. And, if you're trying to build something from scratch, like that's what you do. Who cares that if you're posting something on Instagram, if you only get like 30 likes on it or something, if it's 30 likes of people who are constantly liking the post, it's like, obviously you got something good because the same people keep coming back around. So you just have to like take it into perspective of what you're trying to do in life and just not get deterred by like, this instant theory of success that we all have. So to anybody out there that's, starting out or things like that, just keep moving little by little. And, within a year, 2 years, 3 years, you'll have this following of people that are going to respect what you're doing and enjoy what you're doing. And even though sometimes people aren't vocal about it, I couldn't tell you how many times I'll bump into somebody and they'll be like, oh, I caught this thing that you did. That was really, really cool, And just because they're not saying it on social media doesn't mean that the people aren't thinking that and also aren't enjoying what you're doing. You just have to remember that you're building something. And, the classic saying holds true. Rome wasn't built in a day. And neither is any kind of brand or business or anything that you're trying to kind of get off the ground.
Once again, listen to Army Focus Radio, talking to our guest today, Daniel Hess. Go to his website, twotonyproductions.com. You can find his book that he self-published, Just a Boy Blaming Himself. You can find that on Amazon and anywhere you can buy books. I want to say, man, first and foremost, man, you rock me with that story, man. That if that doesn't encourage someone to not give up, open heart surgery is serious, but what you had to endure at such a young age, losing a friend, that's powerful. And I just want you to know that's very inspiring, man. So thank you for what you do, and keep sharing your voice and your story, because like I said, it definitely rocked my world. That's powerful, and never think anything less than that, man, because so much go through things. But man, what you went through is crazy, man. Like, keep doing what you do, because it is very inspiring to see someone like you not give up, but to continue to chase their dream.
Well, thank you so much. That really means a lot.
So, man, once again, I want to say thank you, Daniel, taking time, your schedule, talking to Army Focus Radio today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I Am Refocus Radio is brought to you by Foo 4 Star and Holy Crab. Foo 4 Star is a family-owned Asian restaurant in San Antonio, Texas. We have been a local favorite for Asian cuisine for over 10 years. With nothing but full smiles and fast service, you'll be leaving satisfied. Come on in for some authentic Vietnamese food. Holy Crab is one-of-a-kind Cajun Creole-style seafood restaurant located in Universal City, Texas. We offer traditional seafood items as well as chicken and steak. We also offer seafood boils. Come give us a try. You won't be disappointed. You can find these two eateries in Universal City, Texas at 2921 Pat Booker Road.